Today marks the beginning of Reconciliation Week. When we were wondering how to acknowledge this week, we decided that just showing you our amazing First Nations collection wasn't enough. So we thought, as we're a history library, we'll give you some history. To begin with, in the spirit of truth-telling, which is a fundamental part of Reconciliation Week, I also want to acknowledge the PMI's foundation. When we were founded in 1854, First Nations people of the region were still being actively dispossessed of their land, and we recognise that as a colonial institution importing European history and methods of knowledge keeping and knowledge management onto this unceded country, we were absolutely the problem. This heritage can be hard to reconcile with our place as a history library, and it's a problem that's faced by all colonial organisations in Victoria and indeed Australia. First Nations Australians were here thousands of years before colonisation and had been protecting and recording their own histories and knowledge long before the arrival of Western colonial institutions such as libraries. We present our current role as a history library alongside this foundation and ask that you reflect on the dispossession and colonisation that allowed the foundation of the PMI as we look at the history of Reconciliation Week. Reconciliation Week is held from the 27th of May to the 3rd of June. These dates commemorate two significant milestones in the reconciliation journey: the successful 1967 referendum and the High Court Mabo decision, respectively. The 1967 referendum was not to give First Nations people the vote, as is popularly believed. All states, apart from Queensland and Western Australia, allowed First Nations people to vote prior to Federation in 1901. But the Federal Election Act actually wasn't amended till 1962 to allow First Nations people to vote, and it wasn't compulsory until 1984. So what was the referendum for? It was to amend two sections of the Constitution, Section 51 to allow the Commonwealth to make laws for First Nations people, and Section 127 to allow First Nations people to be counted as part of the people of the Commonwealth. It was one of the most comprehensively successful referendums in Australia's history, with 90.77% of Australians voting yes. Essentially, the outcome was that after the referendum, First Nations people were counted as part of the Australian population. The Mabo High Court case was brought by four Meriam people: Eddie Mabo, David Passy, Sam Passy, James Rice, and Selulia Mapo Sale. They brought an action against the state of Queensland and the Commonwealth of Australia, claiming native title for the Murray Islands. They were challenging the assumption that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders had no concept of land ownership prior to colonisation, and that sovereignty delivered complete ownership of all land in the new colony to the Crown. The case was successful, though very sadly Mabo died before the decision was announced. This overturned the mythical concept of terra nullius, that the land was empty when it was colonised, and was the setting for the base of all future native title law in Australia. The theme for Reconciliation Week this year is now more than ever. So we need to learn about our shared histories, cultures and achievements. So that finally, because we are a library and it wouldn't be a PMI video without some books, here is just a snapshot of some of our amazing First Nations resources collection. If you want to come with me, quite a bit of our First Nations collections on loan because it is one of our highest use areas of the library, but I wanted to highlight some examples. So for example, we have Dark Emu, which I'm sure most of you will have heard of, but is a fascinating look at how First Nations people were managing the land for thousands and thousands of years prior to colonisation. This book actually changed how a lot of people think about Australia's history. We also have some amazing stuff on our on the referendum. So this one's the Voice to Parliament handbook, which has won several major book awards, and it's a really good way of looking at the social impact and what the referendum meant to different people. We also have this one that's on the Uluru Statement of the Heart. So this is a really good way of examining what the Statement of the Heart means for the country and what it could mean going forward. And it's a really important part of our own history as a country too, that this book was written and that it was all put together. And if you want to look a bit more esoterically, we have Every When, which looks at First Nations concept of time, particularly because it's a lot more circular and a lot less linear than Western concepts. And it completely shifts the way you think about the past and the way you think about history. And we have a lot of books on First Nations understanding of land and landscape. One of my favourites is from the First Knowledges series. So we have astronomy, So this looks at, the First Nations Knowledge series looks at a whole different range of First Knowledges. This one specifically looks at what First Nations belief systems and knowledge and understanding and knowledge management can tell us about stars, effectively. So how they've seen astronomy throughout tens of thousands of years. We have some amazing art books too. This one's actually from our National Gallery of Australia exhibition that looks at the Seven Sisters songline, so tracking a whole bunch of different belief systems and what the stories that they can tell through past and through time. As I said, a lot of our books are actually for loan, or actually on loan, particularly our Victorian resources, because I wanted to highlight just one of the little local stories that we have. This is about Auntie Iris, and she grew up on Tyrak, the Lake Conda Mission, and this is just her story, and it's a really important history of the Western District. So that's just a few examples of our vast First Nations collection. We have more down in stacks as well. So come in, have a look. Anyone who's writing Australian or Victorian history, First Nations should be in the absolute centre of it. And happy Reconciliation Week. Thank you.